This is an excerpt from the New Testament Revelations of Jesus of Nazareth. Revelation 26. Divine love is a privileged gift of the Father. I am here, Jesus. I will answer the question which Dr. Stone wanted to know. If it were possible for celestial spirits to keep on obtaining the divine love of the Father throughout all eternity, once the privilege of obtaining this great gift has been withdrawn from mankind. I have already written to you to the effect that even though the privilege of obtaining this great gift is withdrawn from mortals and spirits who have not obtained any of the divine love of the Father at the time of its withdrawal, yet those whose soulmates are in the celestial heavens, but not those who have some of the divine love in their souls and are progressing through the spheres towards the celestial heavens, will retain the privilege of thus obtaining the divine love for a certain period of time, as a period of grace, before the privilege is taken away from them as well. 1. Now in the case of celestial spirits, the privilege of obtaining the divine love can never be withdrawn. And this holds for souls with some of the love who are progressing towards the celestial heavens. For the Father cannot withdraw his love and divine nature from a soul once he has bestowed his great gift upon that soul. For once some of the divine nature is lodged in a soul, it can never be removed. And that soul has the privilege of seeking more and more of the Father's nature for all eternity. The divine love in the soul of man or spirit gives to that mortal or spirit a kinship in nature with the Father, born as a result of the at-one-ment that then exists between the soul of that mortal or spirit and the great soul of God, even if only to a certain extent. And in fact, this kinship grows ever closer throughout all eternity, as more and more of the nature of God is conveyed into the soul of that mortal or spirit. God does not withdraw his own nature or essence from the soul of the mortal or spirit which has done the will of the Father and has obtained, if only to a small degree, his divine nature. And thus the Father may withdraw this privilege from souls which do not have the divine love, and those souls have lost nothing which they did not possess before. But removal of the love from a soul possessing a portion of it would mean God's taking away from that soul the great gift which that soul obtained by prayer, and such a removal of the love would mean that the soul's earnest longing for his divine love would be in vain. So even if the gift of the divine love is withdrawn, it means that its withdrawal applies only to those who have not sought for it and have shown themselves indifferent to its presence and not desirous of its possession. It is never withdrawn from those who have sought for it through the earnest longings of their souls, and to such as have received, it is given, and they retain the privilege of seeking it in greater abundance throughout all eternity. The divine love is the essence and the nature of God, and it is always in existence, for if it did not exist, God could not exist. Therefore, it does not mean that if withdrawn by God, it ceases to exist. For the age in which you and the doctor live, and for a certain number of centuries to come, this gift will continue to flow from the source of the Father's being. And when it does cease, it does not necessarily mean that the privilege will be withdrawn for all eternity. For souls yet unborn would thus be deprived of this opportunity of seeking, for it in the mortal as well as in the spirit world and thus it is conceived that the divine love may flow for a period, cease for a period, and then be rebestowed in the fullness of time, and this may or may not continue in a series of ebbs and flows as the Father so desires. 2. In reply to your question, I would say that the first parents were given free will to use their soul desires as they wished, and the result of these desires showed that purity of soul was not a protection against contamination. And the disobedience and transgressions that followed were not merely the aberrations of the first parents, but those also of, and intensified greatly by, the children, until evil became a force that proved more powerful than purity, and man and his descendants degenerated in body and spirituality until they could be likened to, and in some respects were worse than, the beasts in the field. Man wanted to be free of dependence upon God, and sought to be co-equal with God in power and wisdom and immorality without paying homage to his Creator, and immortality without paying homage to his Creator. As a result, pride and arrogance and independence were the first sins that entered the soul of man and defiled it, and murder was not far away. For sin is soul defilement, regardless of type and degree. Although it was God who withheld the possibility of man's obtaining the divine love after his fall, man's condition became such when sin entered that the divine love could not be sought for, in that, in his pride and independence, he willed that it should be removed as an indication of God's protective influence. When man sinned because of his desire to be independent of God, he showed God that he did not want God's help in his progress through life as a mortal. And when he came to the spirit world, the same sense of independence of God was evidenced. God did withdraw his privilege of the possibility of obtaining the divine love, but man had shown that he did not want it if it meant acknowledging God as his Creator and upon whom he was dependent for his good gifts. And he was determined to live without them for the sake of being his own soul master. The same deplorable situation is as manifest today as it was at the time of the great fall among many individuals, and mortals will continue to possess this attitude even after they come into the spirit world. In fact, the majority will never turn to God for this divine love, even though the privilege of receiving it has been in existence since I appeared on earth. There are good and evil spirits in the various spheres which are attracted to man because of the similar conditions of man's soul. A man's desire to act in accordance with God's laws will attract spirits of those spheres which are imbued with the sense of the purity of God's laws. Man's desire to think and do evil will also result in attracting spirits of the earth plane. And men's desire to seek at one-ment with the Father through prayer will just as inevitably cause the bringing into existence of conditions leading to the attraction of the celestial spirits to that man, or to the attraction of those spirits whose duty it is to help man turn to the Father and help him obtain the divine love or more of it. The withdrawal of the divine love at some point in time in the future indicates that this is merely a privilege bestowed upon mankind by a loving Father, and does not mean that divine love will be withdrawn from mankind for all eternity. For actually, this is something which has not been revealed to the celestial heavens as yet. But knowing the Father to the extent that I do, I cannot believe that God, in his great goodness and mercy, does not have a plan of salvation which will permit all of his created souls the opportunity to seek at one-ment with him, even though at the time of their incarnation the gift of immortality has been withdrawn. For just as the souls of men were given the opportunity to embrace the privilege of obtaining the love as spirits, a privilege denied them in the flesh before the time of my appearance, so it cannot be said definitely that at some future date in God's own good time, the privilege will not be in some way restored after the second withdrawal. And even though the celestial heavens will be filled and its doors closed after the second withdrawal, this does not mean that there will not be created another celestial heaven in God's realms. For as I said on earth, in my Father's house are many mansions. And the possibilities of God's acts of goodness and loving kindness are commensurate with his infinite ways of controlling his universe and the creatures which it contains. God, being all love and mercy and wisdom, will not give to man, his children, a stone when they ask for bread, nor a serpent when they ask for fish. At this time I shall say good night and affirm that I am your older brother and friend, Jesus. Received April 21st and May 3rd, 1955.